as of now, we've been working in 6 countries so far. And these are the few verticals that we have been doing so far. So advisory services, under which we work with central government, state governments, and other bilateral programs in terms of energy efficiency in buildings, renewable energy, EV charging infrastructure, and etc. And then sustainable design and implementation that we do for private sector, government sector. Product and solution, we also have our own meters, which basically work on prepaid energy meters, as well as the smart meters for instantaneous metering and monitoring purposes. Skill development is one of the latest field that we have and we said so far. And under this, we pretty much like work with professionals and students as well, and energy efficiency in buildings as well as industries domain. In this vertical, we pretty much like have a very online courses. They are put up in Udemy and Spy, and then there are courses with the interaction with the experts as well. So in case if students wants to explore it through, we have a GT Academy, and you can write it on training at the greentree.global as well. Now coming to the presentation. So these are the let's say the lists of the points which under which we have prepared this presentation. I'll start with what is green or smart building. What is energy efficiency in buildings? How is it different from green building, or how is it correlated with the green building as a scenario? Is it less architecture or more engineering, or what exactly it is? So when we talk about the architecture, there are a lot of design courses of green buildings or energy efficiency. There are a lot many other areas as well that we need to study, whether they are the mechanical component of the building or electrical part of the building as well. Now there is an let's say the scenario where we all are going through, which is pandemic COVID-19. How is this going to impact the design process, and how the services may get impacted once the lockdown gets over? I think there are some certain contextual scenarios which we'll be discussing, and other part of the discussion with respect to the building design aspects will be there in this presentation. Since this is a 1 hour presentation, I'd like to conclude this in 40 to 45 minutes, and then for let's say 15 minutes we'll be having a question and answer round. Changing face of Indian architecture, pretty much like talking about the green building or the let's say smart buildings. I remember when I was working with architect Charles Correa in 2001 2. Uh, I myself have witnessed how the architecture language is getting changed. So I have also seen the project of his in terms of, let's say, Jawahar Kala Kendra, and also have seen the project like LIC building in Connaught Place. So I myself have worked with him on Salt Lake City Center, Ratan Tata's, let's say, the Kane project, and etc. So in terms of the designing of the projects with respect to the Jali Jharokha's courtyard planning, trees as a part of the design, they certainly have a lot of place in the design. But in terms of the material, in terms of the technology, which also uh, have evolved a lot, and that is how the architecture design language also has seen a lot of transition so far. If you see some of the buildings in these slides, let's say the Mumbai or Gurgaon, all these buildings certainly have certain notations, whether they are the glass building, green buildings, or normal conventional buildings. So instead of deliberating on the category or the type of these buildings, let us go through kind of buildings that we have done, and how the buildings, even if they look modern, how they are let's say energy efficient buildings or the green buildings as well. So let's say I'll start with the international projects that we have done. So first one is Nokia factory, which is again, it's a large factory in terms of the size in Vietnam. So it has followed all the international standards. And then the very specific building, which is second one in this case, which is South Korea Chemicals R&D Center in Seoul. We did in 2013. And then in case if you look at the technology point of view, the building used district cooling system. Sorry, at that point of time and particular location, it was called district heating system. So district energy system was set up by municipality local there, and then the building was supposed to run on the absorption chiller system. And then the system was not using the compressor technology, but the low energy cooling technologies with these absorption cooling machines. And then also the building used geothermal space conditioning systems. And this building was the first uh, building considered as a LEED Platinum building in South Korea. So it looks very modern. Now we'll talk about South Korea networks. It's again a very, very specific building which used thermal energy storage as a system. Now, what I'm basically taking naming those terminology so that you can well verse with these new terminology when we talk about the green buildings and the new energy efficiency scenarios, which I'm sure like you when you be in the practice, you'll certainly get to know all of these terms as well. Now, designing is one area where not only the building architecture, but other fields also you need to have ample exposure to. For example, in this case, when we talk about the SK network as a building, thermal energy storage was the technology which was used, but it was used just because Seoul has almost like 6 to 7 electricity tariff differences. So when you look at the tariff difference, it means that in case if you use electricity more in the night time, you can save the cost of the electricity because the electricity tariff in the night is cheaper compared to the daytime tariff. Similarly, in case of POSCO Power, using again one of the best building in Seoul, LEED Platinum. So VRV system at that point of time, 2015, I'm talking about, use that geothermal heat pumps as a improve energy efficiency feature. In this case, then few of the local project here, domestic project, I would say, Gale building in Belapur, Mumbai, Navi Mumbai precisely, Griha 4-star. Then we have Oriflame manufacturing facility, LEED Gold rating. Then we also have seen the project like Fortis Memorial Research Institute, Griha 4-star. It is completed. Then the last one is our own building, which is LEED Platinum building in Noida. Then few of the commercial projects in South Asia Pacific region. For example, this is Bangladesh project, LEED Gold. This is Marriott Nepal. Then Palmal in Bangladesh. All these buildings look very modern, as well as they have a lot of these let's say natural ventilation features as well. For example, Mansion the Salam. So so let's say communicating in a particular language. Let's say that the buildings consider to be energy efficient. I think this is something which I would say as a misnomer, though there are certain debates can always be done on these things. Now, the residential projects that we have seen in case of Delhi NCR or across India, they are again getting developed with a certain rating framework. And then few of the institutional projects like IT Delhi Lecture Hall Complex that we have done. In 2013-14, again, University of Petroleum, Griha 4-star, Guru Gobind Singh in the University, Griha 5-star, it's undergoing project. And this project is again one of the finest project which is getting developed because the project is going for net zero energy building, net zero waste in the building, net zero water also that is being planned for the building. Then again, the school building like British School, which are certainly iconic in nature, and then a lot more features which are related to indoor health and comfort in terms of what is the fresh air coming in, what is the, let's say, the PM level, which is inside of the building or inside the classrooms. So all these things, monitoring or metering in terms of fresh air intake inside of the classrooms, they certainly are the prime let's say the focus point for such schools, which certainly have a lot of the international students as well. Coming to our own, let's say the iconic project in terms of Nalanda University, which is almost like 60 to 70 kilometer from Patna. there is a location called Rajgir, which is the original place for Nalanda University ages back. And then this project is again very iconic because when we are working on this project going for net zero energy building, look at the size of the project, it's almost like 500 acre plus as a plot area or as the site area. And then a lot of these housing administrative staff and different kind of technologies that we can see in there. So this size itself is remarkable, and the aim or the vision of the university management is again more precise in terms of achieving the best. And then when we look at the development pace with respect to the technologies exploration in terms of geothermal cooling, district cooling, DVAP system, desiccant enhanced evaporative cooling mechanisms, all these technologies are being explored in the university in terms of making it more sustainable, net zero, zero waste, net zero water outreach. So all these terminologies which we see in the books, they are being implemented in this project there in Rajgir. Now coming to the specific part in terms of the green building design, I'm sure like we all are fascinated in it enough in terms of understanding the green building design, how it is uh, different or related to the conventional design practice. Now, when we look at the architecture education, certainly a lot of these design courses where we get to learn a lot of, let's say, the functionality requirement, and then we talk about the form follows function, and then let's say the few more iconic terms like less is more, and so many, because this is something which are, uh, let's say, very much like related to the design studios. And then these are in any case the base education that the student should be imparted upon. Now what are the additional things which should become the guideline for the education is like the let's say using the less resources in the building design or as well as operations. Now when we talk about the green building design, I'll certainly like to list down few of the activities which are a part of the framework. One is the site sustainability. When we look at the site sustainability as a feature, it means that we need to basically develop the construction site which should be more sustainable. It should be conducive to the labor because they are the one who are building the building. So they need to be taken care of well. We also need to talk about the pollution because this is something not only about impacting on your site, but also impacting the environment itself. Safety, health, habitation, all these spaces which are part of the site sustainability, they are part of the green building design as well. Water efficiency, energy efficiency. When we say energy efficiency, there is a specific code which has been developed by Bureau of Energy Efficiency or Indian government recently. Now, we have been discussing in as a part of the design aspects when we look at the electrical component design and mechanical component design. As an architect, we certainly feel that it's a team effort because when you look at the architecture design practice, there is a prime consultant like architect, and then there are other sub consultant like MEP, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, firefighting, and so on. If you look at the scenario now, in a particular, let's say, a building size more than 1 lakh plus square feet, maybe I think the consultants number is almost close to 20 in energy consultant, and then other consulting opportunities which are related to the conventional building design in today's scenario. So energy efficiency specifically, there is a specific code, energy conservation building code, which got launched, and then I'll be discussing more on this code in the next slides. Now talking about the water efficiency, which is the third part of the green building framework. Water efficiency, when we look at in the building scenario, we look at the water consumption in two parts. One is inside of the building, the second is outside of the building. When you look at the inside of the building, we talk about the water which is potable coming from the taps, and also the water which is getting used through wet areas like kitchen or WC or washroom areas. Now, this is the inside of the building water consumption. Now, outside the building water consumption is, let's say, horticulture. You car your wash. You also use the water in the cooling tower and some other areas where you use the water. Now, all the avenues where we use the water may not require let's say, the benchmark BOD or COD level. Now, in these particular scenarios, for example, horticulture, cooling tower, flushing, all these locations or the venues are those where we can use the recycled water. So we need to use the recycled water treatment like STP, Sewage Treatment Plant, which can generate almost like 80% of the water coming in the form of gray or black water in the form of reusable water. And then the water efficiency comes almost like 50 to 40 to 50% in the water cycle diagram. So this is something which is very, very important because water is the most scarce commodity after air. So this is we need to take care of these things, and there are frameworks like green building ratings, LEED, IGBC, GREHA. They certainly have a lot of these tools which can help you in terms of savings the water consumption in the building. Now, indoor environmental quality, it is of two level. Now, when we talk about the indoor environmental quality with respect to the, let's say, school or home, or in terms of other in the usable buildings, then we talk about the visual comfort in terms of daylight, what we have, and we talk about the air quality, which is there inside. Now, when we talk about the natural ventilated building and then the conditioned building, uh, with respect to the air quality, both need to be treated separately, or maybe I think differently, maybe the right word. Indoor environmental quality with respect to the air quality, it is being recommended to follow certain standards. In terms of natural ventilated buildings, we need to follow NBC Section 8, Part 1. In case of conditioned building, we need to follow ASHRAE 62.1. And then there's another, let's say, a standard called ASHRAE 55, which is for thermal comfort. Now, in terms of daylight, which is again a very integral part of the indoor environmental quality, it apparently requires a certain level of lux level, which is either given by the natural resources like sun, or given by the artificial resources by the light bulbs or the fixtures. Now, in terms of the green buildings, it certainly advocate or suggests to use more and more natural resources so that we may not need to use the artificial lighting systems. Now, for having natural resources or natural sun rays inside of the building, we need to have proper glass, proper window size, proper specification of the glazing, and then the orientation of the glazing also. The moment you put up more glass in particular other direction, which allows less sun rays during the daytime. So that sort of like the design specific intervention that are governed by the indoor environmental quality, daylight requirement, air quality requirement, and etc. Thermal comfort requirement in this scenario. Material and resources, which is, I'm sure, like being an architect, it's a very, very important part because most of the cases, when you talk to the client, this is something which is cost dependent factor also. And most of the cases, it revolves around sustainability as a feature as well. So material resources, when we look at the green building framework part, then it talks about the recycled content. Let's say if you talk about the let's say flooring material or brick wall or the, let's say, cement or steel, on all these material which we consider as a part of the building construction, they certainly part of the specific requirement benchmark as per the ratings. So for example, for the steel or fly ash and etc., there are two category requirement. One is the fly ash content, means which, let's say, the cement needs to have a minimum 15% fly ash content. Similarly, in case of bricks, they are supposed to be mixed with the fly ash content. Now, Apart from the fly ash, the second category comes in under recycled content. Now there are so many material, including the glass, they are getting manufactured with the recycling of those materials. Also, for example, steel, glass, aluminium, all these let's say the manufacturers which are there in the market, they manufacture using the existing salvage material, or let's say the part use material as well. So post industrials, you will not be able to figure it out whether they have been manufactured with the already used material. Now the new terminologies which are coming in the international market or even in India as well, which is called EPD, Environmental Product Disclosure. Now what it means that it is not only about the recycling or the fly ash part usage in the building material. It also talks about the factory where where these materials are getting manufactured. What is the quality standard? The ingredients of the material. In case if fly ash bricks are getting manufactured with this with the chemical, with the cement, with the fly ash, then what are the ingredients component in terms of the environmental impact? So all these material specifications which are related to the EPT, environmental product disclosure, they are also getting a lot of traction as of now in the market. So new thing, you may Google it in more detail. Innovation, I'm sure, like being an architect, you are all going to practice in the market. Innovation is one thing which I'm sure like the client always expects you to do, to have in the building design. So this is something which is very much important, how you can make your building distinguish among all the buildings in that region. Now coming to the energy efficiency part, because this is something which is very close to our expertise, and that is how we been discussing as a part of this presentation as well. What is energy efficiency in building? So as I have explained, when we talk about the green building, energy efficiency is the component of the green building part. It talks about the energy efficiency in building, how you are reducing the operational expenses of the building in terms of the electricity, also in terms of the capex, capital expenditure of the building, in terms of downsizing of the equipment. So these are the two features, but more important features, because they are cost related and also they are operational efficiency related features in the building. Now, I'll go to the background of the code as well in terms of energy efficiency. So energy efficiency in terms of the building code, ECBC, we call it Energy Conservation Building Code, got started in 2007. It launched by Bureau of Energy Efficiency 2007. The latest version got launched in 2017. And when we look at the code here in India and internationally, let's say most of the green buildings which we have done internationally, LEED certification, they require ASHRAE 90.1. So ASHRAE is again the, let's say, the counter code that we have seen across the globe, because it has a lot of these features where internationally all the locations can be correlated, can be figured out that what type of efficiency standard can be required for a particular location. So as a similar to ASHRAE 90.1, ECBC is used here in India in terms of achieving the energy efficiency in the building. Now the code talks about the minimum efficiency standard. It means that when you construct or develop or design the building with respect to this code, by legal or legally, this is the worst efficient building with respect to the legal terms. So that is why it is called as minimum efficiency standard. You can always achieve better than this. Now, talking about the code integration with the building design, we need to understand the first principle in terms of heat gain. Why do we need the energy efficiency? Now, when we look at this slide, you look at the building component like wall, glazing, roof, and then you also look at the typical or conventional building materials like the brick wall, which we use, let's say the red brick construction, 230 mm brick wall, glazing, which is again the let's say single glazed ET150. So not very let's say transparent glazing, but is high performance single glazed window. Now the roof is 150 RCC roof, which is again um, a very conventional construction practice, which has a U value or conductance value is 2. Now look at the pie chart here. Now it shows that what are the features, what are the parameters which are responsible for heat gain inside of your room. Now, if you look at your surroundings, you also need to look at what are the responsible factors to have the heat inside of this place. Let's say ventilation. If you have your let your windows open, certainly the ambient conditions which are on higher side of the temperature in terms of 35, 40 degrees Celsius, ventilation will allow more ambient conditions to come inside, and then the heat will be coming from there. Similarly, people, light, roof is one thing which needs to be taken care of well, because it is the horizontal surface, and most of the sun rays which are coming along with the infrared component of the rays, they bring a lot more heat inside of the room because of the roof component, then wall, and then the infiltration and the glass. So all these parameters which are responsible for a lot of heat gain inside of the room or the building, and then you need to put on the ACs in terms of making this heat off, right? You are offsetting the heat by running the AC. When you run the AC, then certainly the let's say the electricity bill will uh, be generated more. In case if you don't run the ACs, then you have to compensate you on your thermal comfort. You may have adaptive thermal comfort scenario where you can feel comfortable at the temperature of 30, but in most of the cases, in general scenario, when we look at the thermal comfort conditions more suitable to human bodies, let's say 24 to 30, 26, 27 sometimes, but when it reaches to 30 to 31 to 35, some discomfort is already felt. It depends on your activity as well. In case if you are studying, you need to have a required thermal comfort so that the uh, let's say the focus should not get diverted. The moment you talk about more metabolic processes, for example, if you are working in a factory, then you do not need the precise thermal comfort. Even if the temperature is 32, 33, it is okay for those factories. Similarly, you might have witnessed, in case if you have visited these factories ever, then the, let's say, ready-made garment factories where owner deliberately do not put on the ACs in those shop floors, but the offices might have the ACs, because it is an understanding that the people who are working in the shop floor, they should not get the uh, most comfort conditions. Now, coming to the building and performance standards, which are part of the code uh, in terms of ECBC section or Article 4. Now, the first and foremost, being an architect, we understand that appropriate orientation and shading is the one which can save maximum energy or can avail maximum natural resources inside of the building. If you look at your own house, if the house is oriented towards the west, I'm sure like you'll always be in pain throughout the life cycle of the building, because the west side will allow more and more heat always all the time. So that is where the orientation apparently impacts a lot in terms of the building comfort, the building design scenarios, and you need to treat the facade in case if the let's say the orientation is worst. And that is where we look at the designer's role in terms of making the building more comfortable with respect to the design aspects. And that is where we see, let's say in this particular slide, you have one type of facade, you also have another type of facade. Your responsibility is to make the indoor climate comfortable. Material choice is up to you. You need to do the analysis, what is the light level that you need to have. You also need to do the analysis, what is the heat gain that you need to have, so that the interior specific systems which have a certain responsibility to make available the thermal comfort needs to be optimized in terms of the sizing and also in terms of the efficiency. Now coming to the envelope more precisely in terms of enhanced wall and roof insulation, Now, from the code perspective, it apparently talks about what is the minimum heat resistance value that we need to have in the building. For example, in case if your building has a very single brick wall construction, then you will allow more heat inside the spaces. You can also correlate this phenomena with respect to the palaces or the, let's say, the older houses where the palaces wall was almost like 3 feet or 2 feet thick wall. The more thicker wall certainly will allow less heat inside of the space. And in case if you have some ventilation or venturi effect inside of the building design or the palace design, the comfort was already there. Because the first and foremost aspect was to let not the heat coming inside the building. That is the most important aspect. Efficient glazing, so very much important. Now, there are three aspects in terms of the glazing. One is what is the light which is coming from this. We call it VLT, visible light transmittance. You must have seen different type of glass, let's say transparent glass, then the glass which have the tint also, some glasses which have the let's say reflective films also. So all these let's say the features in the glazing industry, they have been introduced with respect to the aesthetics requirement, with respect to the thermal comfort requirement, and also the performance is one thing which is being tracked as of now with respect to these codes and standards. Lighting efficiency. Now, when we say lighting part of the code or the energy standard, it apparently into two ways. One, we have seen in case of envelope part where it allows a certain level of light level in inside of the space with respect to the window size. What is the window to wall ratio that we have inside the space, and what is the window specifications, glass specification of the fenestration, so that the optimized sun rays can be made available inside of the space. The second, in case if let's say you still don't have enough sunlight available, then how you can compensate the lighting level with respect to the efficient lighting system. We have seen the lighting transition and how market has grown in last 10 to 15 years. In just 2005 to 10, at that time frame, if you look at, we were using 10, we started using CFL. Now we don't see these two technologies as of now. We almost seeing everywhere the LED technology. Now this transition is phenomenal. Certainly based on the technology which is becoming cost effective, and also it is because the technology which is more reliable, more durable in terms of the life cycle of the fixture. So when you get the let's say the desired outcome in the least cost, this is the best aspect of the building design in any case, and that is what the responsibility of you as a designer in times to come. Now coming to the thermal comfort systems and control, this is the most important aspect from the designer perspective. In most of the cases, the architects may ignore these requirements just because they understand that the counterpart in terms of sub-consultant, MEP, mechanical, electrical, or HVAC designer may look after these aspects. But I'm sure, like, when you look at the consciousness in the architects, they certainly look at this as a holistic design practice rather than the component design practice. When I was working with architect Charles Correa, he was discussing a lot with respect to these service designers, service engineers, or the mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineers who were part of the team or part of the external consulting, let's say the part. So in case of comfort systems and control, primarily if we look at the requirement, I did explain that there are two types of building: natural ventilated buildings or mechanical ventilated buildings. The second one is the air conditioned building. We have seen both, because in case if we look at the home or house itself, certainly it is being developed as the envelope which allows natural ventilation also, and also in case if the room is sealed, then you put on the ACs and you have the controlled comfort conditions inside of the bedroom or the drawing room and dining room as well. So similarly, in case of comfort systems and control, if we look at the requirement, then certainly the NBC Section 8 Part 1 is being referred in terms of natural comfort conditions. And also, as a designer, we also need to look at the requirement with respect to the quantification of the air conditioning area. For example, you have 1 lakh square feet building which you are going to design, then how much area of the building needs apparently the precise comfort conditions, or how much area that apparently requires the mechanical ventilation only or the natural ventilation only. For example, passages, even if they are the doubly loaded corridors, or any specific area where you don't need the ACs, you do not need to put on the ACs there. So when we understand the 100% built up area, maybe I think 60-70% built up area is conditioned or should be conditioned when we talk about the complete air conditioned building. Now, when we talk about the mixed mode ventilation, it means that part of the building should be running on the uh, natural ventilation or mechanical ventilation, and part of the building should run on the uh, system. Now, what are the air conditioning system inside the building? You must have seen room air conditioner like split ACs, window ACs. Then you also have seen the centralized air conditioning system like water efficient system, or let's say air cooled system, air cooled central system, or water cooled chiller systems. All these systems have the centralized cooling machine, like we call them chiller. We have a centralized distribution system, we call them air handling unit. And then we also talk about the centralized refrigerant cooling system also, which is being supported by cooling tower. We call them as a let's say cooling part of the system as well, a water side of the system. Then we have pumps which apparently run the whole let's say water side in the closed loop scenario. You might see the picture which is showing in terms of how the closed loop works. So the pumps are very much important factor in the cooling system, which is again based on the hydropneumatic pressure level, and then they work on the closed loop level so that the efficiency can be achieved in more required manner. Now, the last part of the energy efficiency or energy code component is electrical power and renewable energy. You must have seen several buildings using building integrated photovoltaic panels, which certainly become the aesthetic part of the building as well. Uh, then you also have seen the, let's say, the windmills, which are not very much like common here in this region. But if you look at the coastal areas where you get the desired wind speed, they are pretty much like part of the building as well in most of the cases. Electrical component is very much important. It's the supply side of the equipment of the building. Let's say the transformer, DG set, voltage drop, load losses, meters, monitoring equipment, BMS, IMS, EMS, all these components which are a part of the mandatory requirement of the code that we have seen. Electrical power, I already discussed. It's very much important, but most of the cases we don't apparently uh, give enough consideration while designing those buildings. Maybe I think most of the cases we give almost like 90% of the time in terms of designing the shell. 10% of the time we give in terms of discussing the engineering side. But I think it should be almost like 60-40 ratio. Now, is it less architecture or more engineering? I think it's very much important aspect that we need to deliberate and discuss. When we look at these understandings in terms of the requirement of daylight inside of the space or thermal comfort requirement inside the space, there are all the tool-based analysis, which I'm sure like for you being the architecture students, there's a hell lot of opportunity in this domain. Huge requirement from the owner perspective, from the designer perspective, how much daylight that you can get out of the specific window size, window specification, or through other measures in terms of inside of the space. And this is something which is very, very important aspect as well from the designer perspective. You need to design the building which can breathe. both in terms of the air, also in terms of the other natural resources. So this is something which is like can be done with respect to a lot of these tools available: Ecotect, DaySim, Radiance as a plugin, IES. So there are tools available. Some of them are free, some of them are paid as well. Now, for the landscape design perspective, most of the consultants or the designer fraternity, they apparently should use the shadow analysis, so that they can apparently look at the land in terms of where they could get the daylight proper during the particular season, or some of the locations which you can identify from the shading analysis in terms of the areas where they would not get the light ever. So the landscape planning should be done accordingly with respect to these analysis in place, so that the plants can survive in due course of time. Now, in terms of the location or identifying the windows or the holes inside of the building, what are the locations which should be having sizable, or the appropriate size of the windows? It should be certainly governed by the prevailing wind directions, as well as the functionality requirements. Now, in these cases, in most of the cases, in general, let's say architect gives the opening, be it the window or the doors, based on a specific functionality. But I think this is something which is very much important when you look at the development level, let's say at the university or at the large size of the campuses level, where the built environment should utilize the natural resources fully or partly. Then there are, let's say, the low energy cooling technologies, let's say earth air tunnel or geothermal cooling. All these are very much important. Then there are tools which help you in terms of designing these earth air tunnel as a machine, as a low energy cooling systems. And then there are sizing which are which can be governed in case if there is a compensatory chiller system which needs to be part of the earth air tunnel, and what is the size of the system. So there are tools, let's say the trances or the ANSYS, so which help the designer in terms of designing these systems. Now, if you look at this slide, you can apparently look at what are the factors responsible for particular consumption, and how we have optimized the specific consumption of the building with respect to these, let's say, ECMs. For example, if you talk about the HVAC, then VRV or 5-star ACs, how much effect that they have done in terms of space cooling or heating requirement. What is the efficiency standard got impacted with respect to the efficient lighting or occupancy sensor or daylight sensors inside the building. In case if you have a wall uh, or the envelope which talks about the insulation or having a double glazed unit inside the place, and how much impact on the energy consumption of the building will happen. Then certainly in terms of the cooling system, in case if you have the low hostels, they have used the low energy systems like these, where the precise air conditioning temperature is not required. But when we operate the hostels during the night time, this technology works successful. Very efficient technology in those usage requirements. Now, in terms of the orientation and the facade of the building, how it helps in terms of reducing the heat gain inside of the building, and how much energy efficiency can be achieved with respect to these ECMs. So all these, let's say, the calculations which are a part of the opportunity scope, we need to understand as an architect also. These are all the numbers which you can get from these tools, how much energy can be saved and how much energy can be generated with respect to these renewable energy systems. And then you can apparently see what is the consumption pattern, and then you can plan more for the buildings as well. Now, the last part in terms of the presentation, which is talking about the impact of design approach post COVID scenario, it's very much important because we are all going through this pandemic. It's very much relevant slide. I would say this is again with respect to our opinion and understanding of the market. When we look at the building owners or the project management advisory side, project typically has an architect, MEP designer, green building consultant, and facility management team in terms of operating the building. Now, when we look at the sub-consulting requirements, which we see in the market, is the facade designer, lighting engineer, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and the building management system engineer. Now, with respect to the changing of the scenarios with the, let's say, when you talk about the closed systems, let's say the closed building or sealed building where, let's say, a lot of these issues which we have seen in case of Western or European countries, the numbers of infected people are becoming more and more. We look at our scenario where the natural ventilated buildings are giving breather in terms of less impact with respect to these viruses. So what we understand that in case of taller building or the bigger building, the centralized air conditioning system will certainly be there, but enhanced fresh air requirement shall be changed. There'll be more. We also need to look at the filter quality. So when we have air handling unit, then we talk about the more precise filter. The quality should be more finer so that these viruses or anything which is related to the PM level, they could be filtered out at the distribution of the air level. Now, when we look at the smaller scale buildings, when we let's say the 20,000 square feet building or your own home itself, which is let's say 1,000 to 2,000 or 5,000 square feet as a built-up area, then we talk about the DX of VRF systems, means split AC, window AC, or VRF, VRV systems. Then the treated fresh air. In most of the cases, the designing part certainly don't apparently take care of the fresh air requirement, because we see this as a requirement windows whenever it is required. But in general, in case of home, it is possible. But in case of office, it is not possible. Who will apparently operate the window in case if the peon is not there? In general, nobody will do. So treated fresh air is one thing which is the requirement. So there are machines or TFAs which are available in terms of making it possible, along with the cooling machines. So DX systems, VRF, they don't have provision to have the fresh air intake as of now. So TFAs is one thing. Then also the designing should apparently take care of the more operable windows. They will be the part of the design. That is what we understand in terms of the changing scenarios. So in terms of additional requirement, which we have seen in case of earlier or conventional requirement, we also need to look at the ventilation expert now. We also need to look at the energy expert, because people apparently have started talking about the less cost for the operation of the building. And then mechanical ventilation, they talk about the CFD, computational fluid dynamics, as an engineering field, which is going to be required. Ducting or AHU designer. So very, very important part where we talk about a specific filter quality, specific air quality inside of the building. People are going to be more and more conscious. I'm sure, like post-COVID scenario, these scenarios will be taken care of very, very consciously. And this is the requirement as well. I think the last part is LCA expert, is the new requirement that we can envisage, is the life cycle cost analysis. So it means that you are building for let's say 50, 60 years, but most of the equipment that we see are not meant for 50, 60 years. They are meant for let's say 1 to 5 or 10 years. Centralized air conditioning that you put up in your building is meant for only 25 years. So you need to design the building with respect to the maximum life cycle or optimized life cycle scenarios. And then I think the cost of investment and the ROI, EBITDA, all these terminologies will certainly be the part of your studies or your practice as well. So this is from my side. I'm open for the Q&A and the question answer in case if you have. Thank you very much.
First, I would like to thank Anurag for such a splendid presentation and for really, making it so clear to our students and all of us on the use of energy in buildings. One question, Anurag, this is again related to the pandemic scenario we are in. All are recommending to go for, external ventilation as far as possible.
Yes, sir.
But given the scenario that external ventilation consumes the one of the maximum energies, 28% as per your earlier slide, How do you think we can handle the energy efficiency part if we start having 100% external ventilation also? It is going to be a difficult situation. So, any ideas on that?
Yeah, I think your point is very justified. The more ventilation that you have inside of the building certainly will cost you more in terms of the energy consumption. But I think it's a trade-off that we all need to do, whether the health is more costly or the energy bill.
Def-
Yeah. So I think we understand that this will again depending upon the affordability factor, because there's no such norm which is available at this point of time, which can ensure the building designer or the owner to have the fresh air requirement, barring a certain codal requirement. For example, the ECBC code, which is applicable for let's say the building having more than 1000 square meters of plot area, or 2000 built up 2000 square meters of built up area. So more than this benchmark, in any case the fresh air requirements of the building shall be taken care by the codal requirement. Below this, I'm sure like there is a diligence which should be there by the designer. He should or she should apparently recommend these things in due course of time for the better lifestyle of the owner, as well as for better breathing of the building as well.
Thank you, Anurag.
Thank you.
Anurag sir, I have my question as well. So, so my question is that even though we talk about green buildings, various systems, and everything, so still people have this notion that green buildings is a myth. Myth in the sense that you have to pour in a lot of money to make a building green. What do you think? Is it is still a myth, or are we actually achieving that green building goal, as we say as sustainable consultants and as an architects also?
Yeah, I think see, when we look at the conventional design practice, or for example the architects who design the buildings, they certainly design the building with respect to the all knowledge that they have in terms of practice or from the academics. We don't do the judgment in terms of whether they are doing right or wrong. But in terms of when you say the green building ratings or scenarios, they give you the complete or holistic framework through which they don't judge you in terms of you are doing good or bad, but they give you a lot more these tools through which you can analyze and can evaluate whether your design is good in terms of fresh air, in terms of daylight, in terms of energy efficiency or not. Because before analyzing and you have the numbers in place, certainly it is all your thumb rule or your consciousness, your trust, whether you are doing correct or not. So I think this is one part or one point which I wanted to mention. The second point in terms of the cost you mentioned. So certainly in case of, let's say, if you are not doing much with respect to the design aspects, let's say air conditioning or natural ventilation or fresh air intake, daylighting, certainly the base level will be really low with respect to the green building rating requirement. The moment we look at the buildings which are already uh, doing good with respect to, let's say, the government building or the bigger building, the private sector building, I don't think that there is much of the cost escalation at this point of time. For example, you must have seen, I think there's an example that I would like to quote here. So you must have seen the paint industry. So earlier, the paint was without any low either VOC marking. So when we used to buy or needs to apply the paints in our homes, it was it was just like which one is the less costly, right? Asian Paint or Berger or anything. Now we talk about the low VOC content because it is something which is very much related to the breathing requirement. The moment you apply the paint and you sit there in the room, in case if your eyes start itching, it means that it has high VOC value there in the paint. And can cause you asthma also. Worst case scenario. Now, when we look at the market change scenario, almost all the companies or the paint companies, they have also started giving the low VOC or even the no VOC paint also. In due course of time, the market has grown so well that the cost difference is nil as of now. So we can understand that when we talk about a decade before situation, where the cost was almost like maybe I think 1 to 2 or 5% more compared to the conventional building, because you need to take care of these additional features. At this point of time, in case if you start integrating the green buildings benchmark at the concept level, you will not have any impact on the cost, because this is certainly which I'm saying based on maybe I think our own experience. We have done almost like 500 plus projects, 10 years old experience also in this domain precisely, where we have seen the projects where 5% additional cost was incorporated in the government project or even the private sector project. But now nobody apparently either raise any voice in terms of the cost impact, because they understand that this is something which maybe I think 90% of the things are being governed by the local bylaws, and 10% is certainly they need to do the best for the customers. So I don't think that there's any impact as of now with respect to the cost.
Thank you, sir. In continuation, in this question again, the second part is that do you think the green buildings that we have envisaged as a person, as an architect, as a green consultant, are they performing as they are performing on papers? The practicality of green buildings, basically.
Yeah, Neha, I think this is a wonderful question. Most of the cases when we design the building, and then once the project gets handover, apparently maybe I think 99% of the cases, architect or designer or even the consultant who are involved, they never go back to the building again and check the let's say specific performance of the building, which was let's say envisaged or predicted during the design of the building. Now, what are the current trends or the activities which we are seeing as of now? So all the rating agencies which are let's say awarding these ratings, they apparently have given the limited time frame for the rating award. So for example, IGBC talks about 3 years to 5 years of the range, the time frame. Post this, the rating will be invalid, and then you have to recertify the building as per the renewal requirement of the rating. Because in most of the cases there are certain let's say incentives which are also being governed or being given to the building owner. So the incentives are linked with the continued performance rather than the one-time performance of the building. So I believe that at this point of time there might be a lot of these issues in terms of differences of actual performance versus the predicted performance. But in due course of time, the market shall certainly get matured and the performance variation shall be limited or shall be less.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, sir. Any other question, please?
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'll get to continue with a lot of questions of mine.
Okay, I have one question.
Yeah.
Neha?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Actually, this is regarding the green buildings. Mr. Anurag has talked about green buildings. Do the green buildings have the air conditioning system with artificial intelligence, or how they are saving the energy? Because this is going to be a very big thing in future, I believe.
Yes, sir. No, thank you for the question. Apparently, at this point of time, when we look at the system level communication, most of the manufacturing companies which are there in the market are also in, let's say, incorporating the communication part in the system as well. For example, if you look at the chiller, be it any company, be it the Carrier, Train, or any company's chiller, they certainly have the open source mechanism installed as a part of the chiller as of now. So you can get the data from the chiller, what is the efficiency that chiller is running at this point of time. So there is a display also available. There is a port also available through which you can collect the data. Similarly, there are certain also available in terms of the communication of the system performance. For example, there are plugs available which are based on the Zigbee communication, or there are other communication port available through which you can collect the performance of the individual, is it geyser or even the fan or even the air conditioning system, so that you can collect the data and can analyze the performance of the system. It's certainly one of the fields which is going to be really big in due course of time, because all these things will certainly be governed by the retrofitting of the air conditioning or appliances efficiency, and also the life cycle of these equipment as well. So I totally agree that this is very important aspect in terms of communicating the performance of the equipment, and it is going to be the big market in time to come.
Thank you very much.
Anurag, hi. Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, hi Anurag, this is Sudhir Khandelwal, architect.
Hello, sir.
Sudhir sir, your voice is not
making
audible.
the efficient. I have things like.
Hello, Sudhir sir, your voice is not audible.
Yeah.
Hello. Hello. I think Sudhir sir can't hear us as well.
Yeah, Neha, unfortunately, I could not listen.
Yeah.
So, sir, I could not.
Okay, I'll just give him a call and ask him. Is there anybody else who wants to ask the question?
The format. I'm not able to get you.
Sudhir sir, I'm really sorry, but I could not listen anything except the last.
Can you hear me now?
Line that. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, Neha, I don't think there's a fault with my my connection. So please carry on with some other questions.
Yeah. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay, then I might as well ask. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anurag, so I wanted your views on the specific technologies that you use for making a building more efficient. Case in point being an example like thermal breakers and window systems in glazings. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or the kind of insulations that you recommend. So I'm not talking about the technology, but I'm talking about the specific technology, especially in the kind of economic climate that we work in. Some of the technologies are recommended by most green agencies and codes make the costs very exorbitant. So I was since I used the example of the thermal breaker in glazings. I mean that in itself raises the cost of the opening to quite some extent. You would know better. While the benefit of that, is it worth introducing that cost? So that's question number one. Did I get myself across?
Yes. Please go ahead.
The other was the working, which I guess Neha has already asked and you've already answered. Is the working of buildings which have been designed to be energy efficient? My example or case in point in my mind being right now that JP head office, which was built in Noida, where the lighting standards were so designed that they come.
So these are, we can't hear you again. Sorry. Hello.
efficiency of the fixture goes low. Okay, if you
Hello. Sudhir sir, I'm so sorry, we can't hear you.
I don't carry the. Okay, all right, please go. Faulted in the system.
Anurag
Sorry,
sir,
sir. I think I'll certainly give you a call separately, and then we can discuss your queries. I can explain the thermal break are available.
yeah, sure.
So, as you have mentioned, thermal breakage, which is the requirement with respect to the windows of fenestration. Uh, in my opinion,
Is wrong. So, whatever you understood, and
Anurag sir, you can continue with that question only.
sure, Neha. Thank you. So I was basically saying that in terms of thermal bridge or thermal breakage is required just to ensure that leakage of the conditioned air is not there. The moment we look at the older buildings which used to use these wooden panels, so in those scenarios, because when we look at our climate condition, which is composite in nature, it certainly has almost like 40 to 50 degrees Celsius temperature difference. So in the peak winter, it reaches to 1 degree Celsius. In the peak summer, it reaches to 45, 46 degrees Celsius. So almost like 45 degrees Celsius temperature difference that we can see. And now the material which are, let's say, wood or these cases, they certainly buckle or bend over a period of time the moment there is no such, let's say, preventive measures against the harsh climate conditions. Now, the material which we talk about, let's say UPVC or aluminum, or even they are the wooden, they certainly can be given without even thermal bridging in case if they are of good quality. Thermal bridge is required just to ensure that the leakage from inside to outside is minimum.
so
In case,
my argument was that maybe we should water down our specifications, because otherwise some of work out cost benefit analysis. So we end up spending a lot more. So maybe I mean I'm only that through our green attempts. Sorry,
yeah, I totally agree, sir. I think we need to have these calculations in place in case if, let's say, any particular office which is running for 24 hours. I'm sure like we need to have the best envelope system in place, even the thermal bridging, even the costly as well. But in case if, let's say, the conference room which is being used oftenly, sorry, not often, which is being used, let's 2 hours only in a day, then we can certainly look at the let's say the functionality requirement as well, which is not much. Then in that case we can compromise on these requirement with our, let's say, envelope sealing or let's say the bridging requirement, which are costly compared to let's say the regular conventional materials or the component of the building. So I think the cost analysis is certainly required. I always agree to your point in terms of making the ROI for a particular investment is very, very important. And I think it's a responsibility for the consultant as well to make the owner or the architect informed about a particular component or ECM, we call it, energy conservation measure, and what will be the cost impact, and what will be the ROI prospectively.
Any more questions? I hope Sudhir sir has heard the answers. His connection is not very good.
No problem, Neha. I think I'll be in touch with him in any case.
Did hear.
So, if there are no more questions, can we move towards the end? Is there any more questions? Okay. I think there are none at this time. I would like to thank you, Anurag sir, so much for connecting with us and talking about green buildings, energy efficiency, and ECBC. And I hope students have got a lot of on their minds right now after finishing your session, and they would try and use those things into their work as well. So unfortunately, our director, Dr. DP Singh sir, cannot join us today because of various engagements at university level. I'm requesting Devjyoti Bose sir to conclude the session if he's here.
Hello, Neha, and thank you so much, Neha and Anurag. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Anurag, thank you so much. But before we conclude this, I have a couple of questions. In fact, I would say there is no dearth of topic that we can really discuss on this subject. There are so many things that I'd like to really discuss and educate myself, as well as on so many aspects are there. But one question that I have, which is a very direct kind of a question. As we go, I've seen that during my corporate time, that air conditioning consultants are just closing their eyes and just clearly, openly, and always giving the water cooled solution, water cooled air conditioning system as the most efficient solution. Now, and that time, architects do not have much except to accept that. Now, do you feel there is that in India there are the opportunities for any other kind of systems which are going to be more energy efficient and cost efficient? That's number one. Number two, another question that I have, that what is basically since especially the students are here, I'd like to ask this question on their behalf, and a lot of these guys are there in the final year and they're going to be practicing in the next few years' time. Couple of years time or so. What is just throw a little bit more light on the pre-certification and how their how it is how architects are involved in it. What is the architect's role in it? That's number two. And number three is that the different types of certifications which are there. A little confusing. Like, say, for example, you have Agriha, you have LEED India, you have IGBC LEED India, you have USGBC LEED and LEED certification, as well as other, and then they have their own categorization. So just throw some light on those different types of categorization, and along with that there is we have one important, which I think Neha has already asked. The input cost. This is something that we always face the question from our customers, from the clients also, on a continuous basis, that what is the unit input cost, and vis-a-vis when are we going to get that cost back? What is in terms of percentage higher cost, say between silver, gold, and say a platinum? I'm sure that from building to building the costs are going to be different, but some idea about how these costs are higher in case the certification we're going for certification, and how this is becoming break even, in how many years of time we just do a break even, and after that we just keep on doing profit only from here. So these are, just throw some light on these aspects, please.
Sure, sir. Thank you for the question. So the first question, if I remember it correctly, it was related to, let's say, energy efficiency cooling systems.
Yes.
So you mentioned that there are certain MEP consultant who prefer to give water-cooled chiller systems rather than the low-energy cooling systems.
Right.
So, for example, sir, if you look at the design aspects, then I think that is where I always emphasize that the architect should apparently not the MEP designer or the HVAC designer, but he or she should apparently have the some broad level of understanding that in case if the building operations are like this, then what kind of system should be more suitable? For example, I'll take the example there. For example, if we are building a 1 lakh square feet as a built up area, and this is a 10-story building, one story has 10,000 square feet as a built up area. And in case
Absolutely.
if the building is being owned by a single owner and is being operated by a single facility manager, and then it means that the building, all the equipment in the occupants in the building, they'll come at one point of time. They will go almost like, let's say, in the evening. It means the operation schedules are also fixed, owned by a single building. Then I think water cool chiller system, centralized system might be the preferred option because you are controlling the operation of the building. Now, in case of let's say multi-tenant levels, in case of every let's say tenant or every floor is being owned or rented by some other organization, then maybe in case of there are offices, there are something else, there are call centers, all the operations are at a different level, then you might select the system which is more efficient and can be controlled by the tenant only. So I think the functionality should define, or the usage pattern of the building should define the system selection first, and then based on the selected system, the best efficiency shall be determined. That is the process that we all need to understand here. This is my suggestion on this. Now, your related question on this.
Do you feel that thermal storage, that one that you have explained starting at the starting, do you think that it is effective anywhere in India?
Sir, we have done one project with Siemens Goa factory, and this has the thermal energy storage, TES, we call it. But let's say let's say there are certain limitations with the system as of now that we see. One, the system is bulky. It requires more space compared to the conventional chiller systems or even the other systems as well. Second, in terms of the maintenance, so maintenance cost is more since it acquires more space, more machines, more refrigerators during the night time. It means that it requires more maintenance also. Second, thirdly, the companies which are manufacturing these TS systems, they are not many. There's only, let's say, as of now, just because the system could not get a lot of the attention from the market or the customer base is not enough, then only single company in India, which is a domestic company, Indore based, there's an organization which is manufacturing and supporting the owners which have installed these TES systems. So I think it is not good for the market, and that is the main reason I think the TES system in India is not the successful model. And the third part, or maybe I think fourth part from the policy point of view, just because we don't have the tariff-based systems, or it is apparently the reason that people or the owners, they are not able to gain the benefit out of it. Otherwise, maybe I think in most of the countries where we have done the projects, let's say in case of US or in case of South Korea, where they have a tariff-oriented, differential tariffs based on the time, they certainly have a lot of benefits in terms of the energy cost rather than the energy efficiency. So one point which is related to low energy cooling, and the first question itself, it was related to, let's say, what are the technologies which are available compared to the air-conditioned building. So certainly, I think in general scenario, we don't look at the very competitive technology, or maybe I think not competitive, but the promising technology compared to the, let's say, not cycle-based chiller system or the machines. But just because I think they, let's say we have evaporative coolers, we have a 2-stage, 3-stage air washers, which can give less compressor-based cooling, let's say, technology. But still, I think in terms of the limitations, they are not able to justify in terms of precise thermal comfort requirement. But for the factories where the volume size is more, and preciseness in terms of the thermal comfort is not there, then 2-stage or 3-stage air washers, which are less costly and less conditioned or compressor-based cooling machines, they certainly are the successful model as of now that we are seeing. Newer technology, when we see, yes, I shown you Nalanda University project, which has proposed DEVAP cooling system, desiccant enhanced evaporative cooling system,
Okay.
which does not use the compressor-based cooling, but it apparently use the integration of evaporative cooling and then the let's say heat recovery or heat exchange part through the specific gel or specific water component or the thin component. So that is like the newer system which are being envisaged, but I'm sure like there'll be a lot of challenges just because these systems are not commercialized as of now.
As
They
of now.
certainly have a lot of these limitations, and maintenance will be an issue. So maybe I think universities will not be taking that much responsibility or ownership of the newer technologies at this point of time. Second question was related to certification process.
Pre-certification.
Pre-certification. So pre-certification is pretty much like the design stage pre-certification or evaluation process. So once your project is registered with the specific rating, then project needs to have a pre-certificate from these respective agencies. Sometimes this pre-certification is required based on the incentive requirement from different state government or municipalities or urban local bodies. But in terms of the process, it is pretty much like based on the design development part for the project. And then you also need to submit the declarations that you will also implement those design specifications or efficiency standard in the construction or in the installation of the equipments as well. So this is pretty much like the design base or design stage certification or evaluation part, which can be achieved at the design stage. And once the project is registered, then you can take, let's say, 2 to 3 months time in terms of getting this certificate from the respective agencies,
including the IAQ of the site. I mean IAQ of the construction. I mean air quality of the construction site also. I believe. And
everything.
Yeah.
Everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And
the
the
last one is
third question was related to the ratings. So what are the ratings available in terms of IGBC, Griha?
So basically from the point of view of input cost for different kinds of rating, how much percentage more? And because this is a question I think all of us face from our clients.
Okay. So I think from the input point of view, if you look at, let's say in general in India, there are 3 dominant ratings which are available. One is IGBC, which has almost like maybe 60 to 70% market capture. Then we have Griha, which is again 15-20% market capture based on the number of buildings which are registered under these ratings. Then we have a LEED rating system, which is again the universal rating system, most would say most famous, most available, universally available rating system. Most structured rating system is also LEED. But all these rating system, when we look at the perspective with respect to the leniency, with respect to their specified benchmarks, then certainly IGBC is more lenient. It means that the input cost for the IGBC will be less. Griha will be most stringent is with respect to the site due diligence. So as you mentioned, the IAQ with respect to the construction at site, they certainly take care of these things because they have very scheduled visits to these ratings to the sites in due course of construction practice as well. So there are due diligences 1, 2, 3, which are scheduled as per the rating requirement. I would not say that they are stringent, but I think most of the cases construction agencies, primarily let's say the contractors, they are not very habitual at this point of time here in India in terms of following all the norms, though all these norms have already been mentioned in NBC. And there is a contract agreement which always referred these NBC requirement in terms of taking care of all the, let's say the barricade height should be more than 10 feet or labor safety, hatments and etc. The ventilation part everything is a part of the NVC section talking about the site conditions requirement during construction. But I think taking care of or maybe I think maintaining all the conditions as per the code or as per the guideline is always the tricky part here in India as of now. But I believe the way we see the Western countries or the more developed countries, they have envisaged, and the contractor is pretty much like informed. And even if you don't ask them, they have all the requirements in place. They follow those norms everywhere in terms of the project, be it the small size or the bigger size of the site. So I think it will take time, but I'm sure like we have seen also the transformation in terms of the contractors' day-to-day activities as well. So I'm hopeful that this will certainly be better.
Contractors as well as vendors also, in terms of their products. I mean, whether those products are coming with those kinds of U values. Say, for example, the windows, doors, the glazings, and so on and so forth. Paints, you have already said that they're coming with the VOC values and all.
Yeah.
Whether the rest of the industry is geared up for the next level or not. So I think that is also an important question in this whole scenario.
Yeah, I think the glazing is one thing which is transforming a lot. For example, from the government point of view, they are also releasing the labels for the fenestration. So as you can see, let's say the 5-star label on your AC, and you can you are informed that the AC is the best performing AC in this particular range, price range, or in terms of this category. Yes. Similarly, this will also be available in the fenestration in due course of time.
Yeah. So another thing, with respect to this, I mean, similar question as that water-cooled chillers and water-cooled system. As against that, some consultants are, giving, depending on the total sizes, depending on the total size of the total connected load or total diversified load. Some people are, I may take an example here. TS SETI sometimes give, HT chillers as against LT chillers. HT DGs as against LT DGs. What's your take on that? I mean, it's a very, I couldn't, couldn't help us but ask this question.
Yeah, I think
HT DGs versus LT DGs. Is there any energy efficiency issue there?
Sir, I think it's certainly in terms of the design aspect, when you look at the HTDG and LTDG, certainly when you look at the machine level at the HT level, they certainly are costly, heavy, bulky. They may require more maintenance part. So I believe in case if
but energy efficiency point of view, I believe that there is a less maybe loss or something like that.
Yeah. So in terms of the DG case, certainly transformer I can understand, because there's a load losses which are important at 50% load or 100% load. But in terms of the DG, I think more or less it is depending upon what is the pollutants which are coming out from the fossil fuel burning. Okay. So CPCB norms, they are the one which are making the standards for the DG. Okay. At this point of time, not I think with respect to the energy efficiency, but B also has launched labels for DG set, but these labels are pretty much like following the process of CPCB norms only.
Okay. I think there is no more questions.
I don't think so, sir. We can end the session.
Yeah. So for students, I'm telling Mr. Anurag Bajpai he's the one of the directors at the Green Tree Building Energy Private Limited, and he heads the sustainable design and strategic planning divisions there, and he has experience working with several SDAs, which is state designated agency for energy policy development. And he's also, involved in many projects related to smart energy metering, engineering, energy storage system monitoring, and green building certification, of course, LEED and IGBC, US GBC, and so on and so forth. So, Anurag, I think it's been a really, really, really very, very I would say, enlightening session with you, and I think we have much benefited. Students would be much benefited, but I feel that the time was definitely limited. Would like to certainly discuss with you in the times to come, and we'd certainly like to invite you for some guest lecture or sometimes for conducting workshop in our university when we open up. And I certainly would like to like to certainly invite you for further interaction. And it's been really, really a very, very great session, I would say. And thank you very much for being here with us and in midst of us for and spending time with us. And thank you so much. Thank you so much, Anurag. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
On behalf of Amity School of Architecture and Planning, thank you so much.
Thank you, Devjyoti sir. Thank you, Anurag sir, very much for conducting this session. I would also like to thank all the students and the faculties and the guests from outside that asked me for them to join the session. And also, I would like to thank my session coordinator, Prerna, also for conducting this session. Thank you, Anurag sir, again very much, and we would like to join with you again in later, in future when the university opens in terms of workshops or sessions and all that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Neha. Thank you, Amity. Thank you all participants. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.